to ask everyone to go, and we're going to stay on mute now as we begin. Okay, you're on the mute button now. Okay, so we are going to do the title story.
Louis, you muted the computer.
Can't hear you.
Oh my gosh. Which computer? That I think
Now everything's fine. Everything's good. Yeah, it's all good.
Mute this one?
No,
Rachel, I'm in double.
no, your computer, your personal laptop should be muted.
Okay,
There
you have
you
to
go.
keep this.
This one is.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
We did the opposite.
Yeah, yeah. Right, it's okay. It's 2023. Here we go.
Can you mute every one of them though?
Yes,
Because they'll forget.
yes, we did. We did.
No,
We're,
she just, okay.
Did we?
oh,
No, that,
no.
yeah, just did
Somebody-
her.
Okay, all right, all right.
It's
We're all here. We're all starting. We're.
How do I do that again?
How
How
do
do I
mute-
mute
mute all?
everybody?
You don't have to even do that. I'm sorry. You just do it like there. You
Okay,
can-
okay.
Yeah,
But there's a button, right, that you can.
there
press.
is a mute all, but then it might,
Yeah.
but
Then it mutes her too.
actually, I don't know if it would mute me.
Anyway, I'll do,
And nothing
One
mutes
by
me.
That's why you come in person. So we can't use the mute button on you, Gloria. Bride for one night. I will share my screen in a moment for all of those out there in Zoom land. However, I will just say that this is a teeny tiny little text. So we are really going to spend more
Good.
time with our friend Ruth Calderon's
Thank you.
interpretation or creative rendering of this story. But I felt that, oh, this was mine. Yeah, I had a little note there. Thank you. I felt that this was a nice way to start our new
Mhm.
secular calendar year. I'm going to take a moment actually, because I see Max is coming in. My friend in Chicago. There she is. Max, it was wonderful to see you in the flesh in Chicago.
It was so amazing to have you here.
Here we are back in the 2 dimensions.
Yeah. It was more fun in person,
Yeah, and the coffee was better in person too.
for sure.
Okay, so we are in Bride for One Night. This is what we're learning. And this, I love this story because it really speaks to the power of what Ruth Calderon's project is here. Until now, you know, we've looked at several very interesting stories, but here's where she starts to give voice to voices that are not heard. What we're going to see is a very, very brief narrative of a great rabbi coming to town saying, "Who wants to be my bride for the night?" That's basically all we get. We'll talk about what that question might even be. And she creates from there a voice for this woman, this anonymous woman who might be his bride for the night. So I'm sharing my screen. Give it a moment. Make sure it's the right thing. Okay. That should do it.
Could I ask you a question?
Yes, please, Sandra.
If I'm ever able to come in person, is it possible for me to sit distance? Is the room big enough where you are that I wouldn't be close?
Yes, yes, we're at a very large table. And we would love to have you at it
Yes.
if it's comfortable for you to do so. Yes, there's space.
Okay, so it might be safe. Okay, thank you for letting me know.
Everybody.
I'm rusty.
We're rusty here.
It's been a month.
I know.
Go up to view.
Yeah, gallery view it. Oh, you are. You're good. Okay. So what we know is that Rav was one of the greatest Amoraim, one of the greatest Talmudic scholars, teachers, leaders in Babylonia, as was Rav Nachman. These are around, say that we're around the 3rd century. So the Mishnah has been codified. We're in the early days of the Talmud. And And this is these few lines that are barely even a narrative, but she takes them and makes them a narrative. So let's read them. Let's spend a few minutes with them, and then let's read this creative rendering. When Rav would visit the city of Tarshish, he would announce, "Who will be mine for a day?" And when Nachman would visit the city of Shachnetiv, he would announce, "Who will be mine for a day?"
He didn't say bride.
He didn't say.
He didn't say.
He didn't say. There is a larger context of how this would work. There is an assumption that there's a legal status change that's happening. That's a good point. I wanted to see if now I want to pull it up. I didn't have a chance to do that before. Because there is a conversation that ensues after this about the status of this woman. Here we go. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you very much.
So let's just take it as a given that this is who will be mine in a formal way. He's not, so what he's not doing, this visiting rabbi, is he's not, paying a visit to a prostitute. He's not just, filling his needs privately. And the question on the chat is, are these rabbis married? The assumption is yes, they are married in their hometown. They've come on a long journey to visit this other city. And while they're there, they announce very publicly, I'm going to take someone above board, take someone to be mine legally, and the community will know about it for the time that I'm here, for the duration of my visit. So is it what's troubling about this story, this non-narrative? What are some of the layers that are like making us sit up in our seats?
Well, one of the things is since he didn't specify, will you be my bride, my one-day bride? I interpreted it, if I sanitized it, it was who will be mine, like who will come and study with me and give me.
That's what someone just wrote in the chat. I was just writing,
I'm not
David.
who
reading
will be
it.
my student? No, I'm saying, but we say,
But the other thing
Yeah.
is, if you're traveling and you're a man alone and you're not used to taking care of
Mhm,
yourself,
yeah.
who will be it could have been my mother, who will cook for me, who will give me a bed to sleep in, so who will be mine for over the time that I'm here visiting.
so
So, you can interpret it.
I want to go to the original text here. It is in the context of conversations around marriage. It
Okay.
is in the
Well, then this
context
is
of,
taken out of
yeah, she pulled it out, and now I'm feeling like I should have given you the larger context. The one who the one who proposes marriage. How does the marriage work? Where is this? I'm sorry.
It could have been a man.
Here, when Rav would happen to come to Tarshish. Okay, so the Hebrew is Rav ki mikla leDarshish. When Rav would come to Tarshish, Machres, he would announce, Man havya leyoma, who will be mine for the day. So the translator actually fills in, who will be married to me for the day. Rav Nachman also would say when he came to this other place, Man havya leyoma, who will be mine for the day. But if you go into the commentaries, like everybody is saying, who's going to be my wife? Who's going to be married to me? I mean, Rashi says, Yesh isha shetitnaseh leyoma, who will be a woman who is married to me for the day. So this was assumed to be the context, maybe because it's in the context of a marriage conversation.
Okay, all right, but just because everyone says it doesn't make
So-
it right.
So thank you, Michael, for your notes. Yeah, you're listening and doing what you need to do. So there is a question on the table, and you made reference to this, Gloria, like what does he need a wife for? Maybe he needs someone to cook for him
Laundry.
and stay with him, and so he's not lonely. But I think it's more than that. He wants a sexual partner while he's away. Maybe he's traveling for months at a time. There's a deep humanity here that these rabbis are people too. And she doesn't shy away from that when she recasts this narrative. In fact, quite the opposite. As we'll see, I told you it's rated R,
Yeah.
or at least
That's
PG-13.
fair.
I see Esther's hand in the Zoom.
Yes, I really, right from the beginning, when he said, who will be mine for the day, and it has a marital connotation or a connection, whatever. It sounds like somebody's doing their taxes and trying to get away with a very good deduction legally. And it just doesn't give me a good feeling about the whole thing.
So let me clarify that polygamy was not against halacha until about 1,000 years after this.
Oh.
Is this before, after this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So around the 10th, 11th century is when we have the Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershom, the institution of, or the prohibition of polygamy.
Okay.
So look at our forefathers, right? Look at Yaakov, who had 4 wives. This was not against halacha for a man to have multiple wives. I should actually mention the conversation that happens right after this in the Talmud is, but wasn't it taught in another location? Rabbi Eliezer taught a man should not marry a woman in one state and then go marry another woman in another state, lest their 2 children be arranged in a match and they wouldn't know that they were forbidden to one another. In other words, if a man has a wife in Canada and then a wife in Mexico and they don't know of each other, they're not actually, there's not a problem legally with him having a wife in multiple places. There's a problem with their children who are half siblings, ultimately maybe getting married to one another without
And
knowing.
birth defects.
Right, that's incest.
Yes.
That's against the Torah.
Yeah.
Well, what about the
Yeah, but
3
also
words? What about the 3 words for a day? What kind of a marriage is one for a day?
So we also, Ruth Calderon is going to talk about this in her commenting about it, but she was reminding us that what we think about in terms of marriage involves love, involves commitment, involves a very Christian sort of till death do us part. But in the ancient world, love and marriage were 2 very different things. I remember there's a wonderful book, I think it's called Marriage, a History, which takes you through the history of marriage and then reminds us that love and marriage going together is a brand new idea in human history. And that most of the time, opposite, the person that you married was the domestic partner and the one who raised your children. The person you loved was your mistress. You know, if anything, this is quite an extreme statement to say, I'm not going to take a mistress. I'm going to marry another woman, because now, by the way, he has a financial obligation to support her. There's a ketubah involved, which is a contract. It protects the woman's rights and elevates her to say this is a marriage, even if it's a temporary.
But Rachel, there's in ancient times, there's different ways of getting married and via in terms of having sexual intercourse. That's one way without any other of the legalities. So there's a
that's technically true, but in practice wouldn't have really kind of held enough sway in the rabbinic circles. But that implies that any relationship, of a sexual relationship, is a commitment.
right.
And it's trying to elevate that, saying you're not here to sleep around. This is a relationship between 2 human beings on some level. Max is asking an important question. Yes, he can have multiple wives, but what about her after he leaves town? Is she protected? So these are great questions. By the way, this group has learned to be very careful readers. Who is this? Why is he doing this? What, right? What's really going on before this and after this?
I have a
So
question.
she's going to address that in her story as well, a little bit. Yes, David, go ahead.
This is a habitual thing. When
Yes,
he
good.
visits the city. So how many wives is he going to have? Every time he goes there, he gets a new wife.
So it doesn't say when he visited. It says when he used to visit.
Yeah. Every time he got a new wife. For a
So
day.
those women, so she also picks up on that. She's going to bring those other women and just sort of by the
Why
by.
would he not keep the same one every time he goes to that?
And
What's your
also, by the
question?
way, it implies that he's very wealthy,
Yeah.
that he can afford this many women.
Who is he, this Rav? He doesn't.
Rav is, so
Like the-
actually, he also was known colloquially, that's what my little note was, as Abba Aricha, which means a long master, or long could be tall. He's physically large, which is the direction she goes in the story, but also large in terms of his prominence, maybe.
Presence.
But
Uh,
he's titled
that-
Rav, that's unusual.
Just Rav.
Everybody else is
Just that
Rav in their name.
He came after the other person who's named that way, which is Rebbe.
Mhm.
Rebbe, who was the codifier of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the great. And Rav and Shmuel are these next two biggest leaders in the early Amoraim. Rav and Shmuel. They weren't even yet called Rabbi so-and-so. Yeah, they were, he was so great that they would just call him Rabbi. All right, let's take a read.
Okay, yes, yes.
And notice some of the things we brought up kind of coming up. Did I get to every chat?
I
got
think
it?
so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And
When Rav,
These two different people, Rav and Rav.
yes,
Yes.
yes, two different
Two
people.
different
Thank you
people.
for pointing that out. Yes.
Where is Darshish?
Darshish is
Is
probably the
Tarshish?
famous Tarshish, which is in the land of Israel. So he would be traveling from Babylonia,
Where Saul was from.
where is it Saul
Tarshish.
and Jonah.
Jonah.
Jonah is from
Jonah.
Tarshish.
Okay.
It's on the coast. So it would have been a big city center. Like he would go there regularly. It wouldn't be, like visiting a small town.
Okay.
When Rob would visit Darshish once or twice a year. So she's already now made that assumption. The whole synagogue would get caught up in a frenzy of excitement, and Rob would lock himself up for hours in the study house to settle matters of law that had been left unresolved. On Shabbat, he would come to pray in the synagogue at the top of the hill, which looked out on the whole town and its houses, yards, orchards, and gardens. Through the screen marking off the women's section, I could see him. So who's the narrator
The
here?
woman.
The woman is telling the story right away. She's
Mhm.
given a voice. It's a remarkable choice that Ruth Calderon makes here. I could see him standing before the ark to lead the congregation in prayer. His body was erect,
Mhm.
his form splendid in a robe of fine stitching, his bright forehead unblemished by sun. Remember we talked about
Yes,
this?
Pale.
Chorus
The pale,
scholars
the pale
would be
skull.
pale and smooth,
Mhm.
and all the men clustered around him as if he were a prince. So this is Rav. Rav is a celebrity
Mm.
and tall and striking and clothed in royalty. So she sets the scene right away from the perspective of this woman. On laundry days among women, I heard rumors that they were looking for someone to serve as Rob's wife for the duration of his visit to our town. So duration of the visit, she's also made a choice, isn't a day. But okay.
Doesn't sound-
And so when the synagogue beadle sought me out in my backyard 4 weeks prior to Rob's visit, I knew what he had come to say. Actually, I just realized it might not have been, the duration might still have only been a day if he's coming weeks before. It might still be a day. I actually think the way it unfolds, it does. But
But why would he be there for such a short time if it's such a long distance and he had to travel for so far?
would imagine he's making lots of stops on this journey.
And the woman's husband was coming home the next day.
Well, she's not, you're gonna find out she's not
Oh, okay.
attached. He found me with my sleeves rolled up and my hands buried in a basket of laundry, delighting in the pleasant odor of clean clothes and the warm sun that would dry them well. I was not a young woman anymore. 8 years had passed since I had
Okay.
been widowed. So she has experience. She's hard worker but it's very physical. It's very, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, there's a word, it'll come. At first, I let the beadle stammer in embarrassment about the role they needed me to play and hint at the assistance I would
Functional.
receive from the community and the amount of ketubah money. So yes, she is being paid. There's the ketubah. I would be paid if the rabbi should elect to divorce me after the fact. I requested some time to think over the matter and I sent the man under his way. By the way, that's technically what a ketubah is. Does everybody know that? The ketubah is a guarantee that if we divorce, I will support you. Because of course, while we're married, I have to support you. That's the ketubah stipulates that the husband supports the wife financially, emotionally, etc. And then if they divorce, this is the sum I will pay.
Is it still the case?
The ketubah that we use is the same ketubah as that Aramaic original ketubah, and it's the least romantic document you could possibly read at the moment of a wedding, which is why many times people then put a translation, which isn't really a translation, but a beautiful, emotional sort of commitment, and it's nice, but it's not what it says.
So to answer his question directly,
Yeah.
there is an amount of money in the ketubah?
Yes, yes.
And
And it also says, and everything I own or will own in the future is subject to this contract, even the shirt off my back. It says, even or his back, this groom agrees that everything he owns and will own, even the shirt off his back, is subject to, like, let's say he goes broke. Well, he's got to sell his shirt. Yeah,
Which is where the expression, I give the shirt off my back.
Exactly.
The word you were looking for
But
was
that's not for
functional. that she
people,
was being
very fun. No, I was thinking very like
Manual-
sensual,
manual.
I was thinking
Oh.
actually. Like,
tactile, yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I requested some time to think over the matter. I sent the man on his way. While lying in bed that night, I resolved that I would accede because of the money and because of what people always say, two is better than one. By the way, that's
We
not just
had that.
people, it's from the book of Mishle, Proverbs.
I remember we studied.
You remember
that.
it?
Didn't-
Good for
yeah,
you.
but I didn't remember where, I thought it was
Aren't
maybe
you came in person for it?
always. But I was.
And
thinking
because it
maybe
had
was
been
called-
years, well, now this is where the PG-13 comes in. It had been years since I had known the feel of a man's caress and the smell of his breath, and I yearned for those days again. It's like, she's like, and I'm human. So she wants him. This is not her being objectified. She has the right of refusal. She opts in and she knows what she's doing. The next day when the beetle returned, I nonetheless gave him a hard time before agreeing to his terms, lest I seem overly eager. I also love her choice of choosing a woman who's a little bit more mature. He conveyed a few strictures that I had to be sure to keep so that I would be ritually pure in advance of the rabbi's visit. So this actually also comes up afterwards in the text in general, like making sure that she goes to the mikvah before the wedding. She's counting right. Exactly. His concern that I might begin to bleed as a result of excitement and anticipation seemed rather excessive, if not downright amusing. That does come up in the Talmud. And this is here a woman writing like, that's ridiculous. Why are these men thinking that's how women's bodies work? But that's another conversation. Nonetheless, I carefully calculated the days of my menstrual cycle as if I were a young bride. They would open the ritual bath, especially for me, in the darkness of night, so no one would see me. The days raced by. On the eve of the rabbi's arrival, word spread that he had permitted the remarriage of 2 chained widows, women who had lost their husbands in a recent flood. What do you think of that? Ruth Calderon just places that acknowledgement in there. You know about the agunot
Agunot.
issue?
Agunot.
Yes,
Pretty fabulous.
that he frees 2 agunot by ruling that even though their bodies were lost, we know that they were in this flood and these women are free.
That's quite an accomplishment because
Yeah, Sandra, what do you think of that? Isn't that remarkable? That
Yeah.
I think what she's doing is she's demonstrating the way rabbinic authority used to work and could work if rabbis were brave and bold and confident enough. Max, go ahead. You wanted to jump in on this?
Yeah, so I agree with what you just said. And like this whole concept is, to the modern ear, this whole concept is so creepy, like, right? Like gross. And I think she's painting him in this really decent light. Like he came and he did this really decent thing for women.
Yeah.
This isn't all so creepy.
So let's name the creepiness nonetheless, which is that the status of women is dependent on the magnanimous man. And this other awkward man coming up to, this woman and arranging her
Pimping.
financial, right? Yeah,
Basically pimping.
yeah, pimping her to the rabbi. Yeah, so that is there, but that's the mechanism they had. And we still have these legal mechanisms in place on some level. So there can still be good guys even within this framework, even if they're working within this framework. The women are given a voice, and these chained women are released so that they again can have autonomy. can
Okay,
have-
if you really want to have fun with that, they could have married each other,
oh well,
the women.
the women.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
Listen, I'm
implied, but
just
the
saying,
remarriage of two. Okay, good.
could be.
Thanks. That's a good rereading. I don't think it was implied here. But nonetheless, we hear now the voice of approval from the community, right? A wave of grateful approval washed over the community, and even I was enchanted by the news. As the rabbi stood at the head of the synagogue giving his talk, his wandering gaze rested on me for a moment. Along with the rest of the community, I felt drawn to his visage. From my place among the women, I felt as if my mourning clothes and kerchief were blushing. A forgotten feeling awoke inside of me. I wanted to get closer to him. During the reception that followed his talk, Rav was surrounded by a crowd that sought his blessing and kissed the palms of his great hands. The leaders of the community allowed him a brief respite from the crowds, and on the terrace of the synagogue amid a great sea of people, I stood there before him. I heard him turn to the surrounding men and ask, "Who will be my wife for today?" So now she's gotten to the quote, but he's not asking it as a free-for-all. He's asking, what arrangement has already been made for me? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, yeah.
Perhaps I didn't exactly hear him say that, but I read his intentions in the curl of his lip. And I knew that I was not the only one who heard the question. Virgins hid their faces and mothers pulled their curious daughters outside and away. No, not her, not her.
Yeah.
There were already a few women who were known to have spent the night with Rav on one of his previous visits. So that
So
was
it's
to your
not the
point
same
before.
one.
Two of them had come to the synagogue dressed in full finery, strutting to and fro. One of them even looked Rav in the eye and gave him a knowing smile. He nodded back to her in blessing. There's no shame in this.
Yeah.
In fact, those women are proud. That's like a
badge
stripe
of
on their
courage,
sleeve,
yeah.
right? Like a, I don't know.
Boy Scout patch,
Like
Yeah, that's.
a Girl Scout patch.
That's right, they got their.
I mean, I don't think,
Yeah.
yeah, the Girl Scouts
It's a
don't have
notch on
that
the
badge.
bedpost. It's a notch on the
What's that,
bedpost.
David? Say it again.
It's a notch on the bedpost.
I think she's having some fun with this, our
Yeah,
author.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
She is.
Definitely.
And thinking about all the women and then the protective mothers. Now this woman is going to play her role, right? I walked toward him with lowered eyes. My feet pattered against the floor to the rhythm of my fluttering heart.
Oh,
I approached no farther than honor would permit. She still knows the boundaries. She knows her role. The beetle whispered in his ears. Rav looked in my direction and gestured to me to come closer. A murmur passed over the crowd, and I felt suddenly relieved that my elderly mother had stayed at home. I don't want my mother to see this. She still thinks of me the way those other mothers were thinking of their young girls. I'm a grown woman now. I have my autonomy. Right? I just noticed the mothers and the mothers. Did you
Yeah,
notice that?
yeah, yeah.
I thought about the chatter of the local kitchen maids who dice up gossip into bite-sized morsels.
Lovely.
I feared for my good name as I raised my eyes. Right? This is still an edgy thing to do. Rav's face was luminous and shone only on me. His beetle approached and led me out of the crowd and into a new reality, opening a door to a new, I don't know, that image, to a new world. A door was opened to a side room. I just thought of the Wizard of Oz,
Oh,
where everything suddenly is in color.
yeah.
Rav disappeared, and the crowd began slowly to disperse. I stood there as if paralyzed. I heard from a distance the instructions of the beetle in my ears. When it gets dark, in the town inn, in the great guest room, there his honor will await you. Meet me here at this time. I had become a bride, for a moment. So there's the title of this book. Bride for a Night is how she feels. She feels like a bride. Even that old feeling of embarrassment seized me as if I were a virgin. When I rushed home, the sun had already sunk to the height of the trees. I moved about the house silently, washing my face in cold water, dressing in a clean frock, and walked out into the empty streets with wet hair, amid the melodies of the evening prayers. The light of the oil lamps dancing in the windows, spilled out into the street, which had become my wedding canopy.
She writes so beautifully.
I know, right?
Harlequin should be knocking at her door.
So she's making for herself a bride moment, and her chuppah
Yeah.
is this light, and she's in the street. I don't know what to make of that, but she's going into this temporary house, the inn, the home.
She's exposed. That's what it
Yes,
is. It's
but
not- it's not a
marriage
secret
is
passage.
represented by a home, by a chuppah,
Okay.
by a roof over your head.
Okay.
Yeah, and she's in the street.
Mm.
Although they would always make the weddings outdoors, right under,
Yeah.
so I don't know. It fits. Rabba was immersed in solitary study in the corner of the room. I was greeted by his beetle, a man I found not particularly pleasant. This poor beetle. This is what he has to do every place Rob goes.
No kidding.
I kept my distance. Suddenly, the rabbi of the town appeared with two witnesses. I stood there as if dreaming, with Rav at my side, my head reaching only to the height of his chest. So remember, I told you he
Yes.
was known to be very
Tall.
tall. There was no wedding canopy and no candles. So none of the pleasantries, right? But I heard once again the words of the wedding blessing, who forbids to us and permits to us by means of canopy and sanctification. So that is the bracha that we still say under the chuppah. That and technically, by the way, the canopy can be represented by the house itself. So it's not as if like everything that had to happen legally is happening.
Okay.
And you're forbidden to this man until you're permitted through this ceremony. The words were spoken like an ordinary prayer, quickly, unaccompanied by tears or smiling parents. Rab said in his stentorian voice, Hare at mikudeshet li, behold, you are sanctified unto me, and handed me a handkerchief from his pocket. So that's how they used to do it. There has to be an exchange, which today we do with
A ring.
a simple ring. But they used to call it the sudar, the handkerchief. It's the same kind of purpose. I reached out my hand and took it. So that symbolizes this change of status and this acknowledgement of the relationship. And then the rabbi and his attendants checked that the handkerchief had been properly transferred and muttered in approval. That's what they still do. These rabbis underneath the
Okay.
chuppah or the witnesses say, yes, the kudeshet, yes.
There's also institutional structure involved here because there's two beetles. We would say parnas.
Yes, exactly. The parnas
So
with
there's
the
the beginning is the synagogues. It says the synagogue's beetle,
Oh,
and then
thank
becomes the
you.
rabbi's beetle.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a whole structure
Yes.
of personnel.
Yes. Yeah, it's deeply structured. So it does sort of beg us to notice that this is all above board.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And Rav said to them, you are my witnesses. And the rabbi concluded, he is sanctified. And then everyone left the room as if they had never been there. So they come in, it's like you're saying these brachot that are usually a once in a lifetime,
Mhm.
we hope, blessing. And instead of saying it like, Baruch Hashem, blah, 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 right? Like a blessing on a snack, they're saying it perfunctory, right? Functional. But they're saying it. And then they leave. Are you ready for the next scene?
I have my water.
Are you ready?
to Throw on me if we get too much.
It's like, and she really acknowledges their humanity. It's so interesting. Okay, then it was just the two of us, he and I, in the guest room of the town inn. It was our wedding canopy and our bedroom and our house and our whole world for one night. It is one night.
Yeah,
Okay, I
yeah.
apologize. Rob did not mince words and did not try to win me over as young men are wont. He also didn't fall all over me. He just sat by my side. I could see his eyelashes, which were long and straight as he is. He looked at me with curiosity and with a certain tranquility, and I returned his gaze.
Yeah.
So now she's no longer looking down. She's like, I am yours, you are mine, we are equals.
Mhm.
The look of his face appealed to me even more from up close, and I delighted in him like a young girl.
Mm.
The room and the honor of the man who sat cross-legged beside me seemed to me like all I would want of heaven. My life, exhausted and well-worn like a paved road, had suddenly led me to a main thoroughfare that I had never expected to traverse. The heads of the community, the luminaries of the generation, and me. I mean, it makes you wonder, she's a simple woman. I don't know why they chose her, but now she's up, now she feels like her status is tied in his. Rob
Yes.
began to say a few words about the town, and we sat for an easy hour, exchanging pleasantries, until I nearly forgot the whole reason that I had entered into this hasty matrimony. Suddenly he took my hand in his and brought it to his mouth. My breath fled, then fluttered, then relaxed like a dove. His eyes gazed upon me as if I were a vision. I realized then that I found favor in his eyes. With the shedding of gowns and scarves, she does this
Yeah.
very
Delicately,
respectfully, yes.
yes.
Names and roles and titles fell away.
Mm.
He became a man, and I cast off my widowhood and became once again a woman. Our nakedness opened the floodgates of our hearts. There was nothing to worry about and no reputation to uphold.
Mm.
After all, this man was no villain and was not the rabbi responsible for it all. The rabbi who? The rabbi of the town sanctioned this. His body in its full expanse was mine by right and holy law.
Mhm.
And there was no fear that our union was, quote, not for the sake of heaven, as our teachers used to warn us about in school.
Oh,
This
my
is
goodness.
totally kosher.
Yeah.
It's like a revelation to her. It's not kosher, but it is. It's making me think it's not kosher, but it is. I delighted in the sound of the words "my husband," which
Mhm.
served as an invitation and a request, and brought back the old sense of being conquered and won. So she's enjoying this. Our bodies did not know if palm would fit to palm, if hip to hip.
Mhm.
We had been taught the proper way of touching on this day, but I was not the young bride I had once been, nor was I the woman I had been before today. And this man was at once far and close, as if he were always a part of me, passing through me like a shadow. And I tasted of his goodness, and I smelled him and touched him and felt my own fingers come alive and went into him and took himself inside me. And I built up and knocked down and draped myself around him and relished the full surrender that had never before been so complete. And my hunger for his breath and for the scent of his body could not be satisfied, and his body was hot and steamy until it reached complete rest. Whoa. Are you okay? I can't believe I'm reading this. That congregation church.
I'm reading it so well.
Thank you. To not read it too well.
Yeah.
Oh, that's, you should do the
Yeah.
audio book of
No.
it.
I was just thinking, we got the audio version.
I'm just reading the words.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We were splayed across the bed, and I opened my eyes, my body full, and I saw that he was looking at me. I'll take you with me, he said. Come home with me, my wife.
Oh,
Now he's like really proposing.
yeah,
I smiled, kissed his forehead, and fell back to sleep.
that's interesting.
And let's just read the end. In the morning, he continued to sleep after I had awoken. It is commonly believed that larger bodies require more rest. I woke up and looked at him as if he were a dream that had not vanished with the passing of night. I banished all thoughts of a baby with a face like Rob.
Mm,
Right? This isn't a real marriage,
yeah,
and I'm an older woman. I don't know how old she is. And all thoughts of following him back to his home. Once again, he did not seem like the great Rob. The form of his body was known to me, like that of a little boy whose fears I'd assuaged. I knew what I would do. I put on my frock and dropped his handkerchief over the bed, drawing its smell once more toward me, and it drifted to the bed wondrously and simply, just like our marriage. Whoa.
wow.
Why did she leave?
Why did she leave?
Yeah, well, because he's asking, I'll take you with me. He said,
Yeah,
"I'll take you
yeah,
with
it
me."
seems like she considers that, right? She thinks about thoughts following back home. But she also knows that's a fantasy. That actually our marriage is just right here in this handkerchief, and
Well, also in the end, she had the control. which is.
Yeah, that's very nice
interesting.
that he's asleep. He's passive.
But she's also
Thank you.
making the decision as opposed to waiting, well, maybe he'll keep me or maybe,
Mhm,
no, she says,
mhm.
no, you
That's
had your
okay.
time.
That was nice, and now we move on.
It's very interesting.
But wouldn't he have required a divorce or get, or she would have required a get? Wouldn't he have required a divorce for the next time he came to town?
So remember, he can have multiple wives.
Mhm.
Yeah, but how many?
Solomon had 1,000 wives.
Okay.
I'm not saying that, I don't know how many cities he visited.
Yeah.
He can have multiple wives, and if she wanted to remarry, she would need to make sure she
Yeah.
had a divorce from him, because a woman can have, it's not egalitarian in that way, right? It's not
Yeah.
equal. A woman can have only one husband.
I think the title should be A Spiritual One-Night Stand.
Yeah.
So the word bride implies that it is a religiously sanctioned one-night stand. I think,
Kosher, yeah.
right, that, I don't know whether, I mean, she says it was spiritual, maybe it wasn't always, but it's, yeah, it's kosher, a kosher
Yeah.
one-night stand.
This reminds me of the story of Esther for some reason.
Esther, okay.
You
so
know,
she's
just
taken to a
because,
great
you know,
man.
there's all of the beautiful women of the
Uh-huh,
town
uh-huh.
and she gets selected and through her
Mhm.
ministering to Ahasuerus, he's totally smitten with her.
Mhm.
And
But
it's just-
against her will, against her, she
Yeah, but she
doesn't
uses
do the
her
cosmetics.
wiles.
She doesn't really want to be there.
Yeah, no, I know it's.
And
not
then
that-
later, yes, there's a shift.
No, but what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
it's the power brokering where the woman uses her
Mhm, mhm,
wiles to.
She didn't use her wiles here. I mean,
Yes, she did. Read that top.
But she was
paragraph.
plucked, but she was chosen. We don't know why. Once she's
Mhm.
chosen, then she says, I've
Yeah.
got some power here.
But I thought that he was only choosing women for one day, for one night.
Yeah.
And then here he's waking up and saying, hey, you know what, we can
Come
come and be with me and let's make it real.
Why is she having him ask that? Is it meant to
Yeah.
sound sincere? Is it meant to just be in the moment? This is what he thinks.
Well, it flies.
Does
in
he
the-
say that to her to make her feel valued, even though he knows that's not a realistic offer?
Well, maybe it is. Come
know.
home with me, my wife, he said.
It's
It's
she
not-
that doesn't, she's not the one, she doesn't say anything and she doesn't accept it. It's not, it came from him directly. And without any kind of
Right.
trickery or anything.
I'll take you with me. Come
Well-
home with me, my wife.
Well, when the first person who saw her, noticed her, was the beadle, okay, the Parnas. And the Parnas had concluded a contract with her already, so she was already chosen.
Yeah.
And she had
Mhm.
volunteered for the job,
Yeah,
and then the beadle said, okay, you have the job. And then, so when the rabbi, all the other women were parading for the rabbi, the beadle whispered to the rabbi to look towards this woman, right? The
Yeah.
rabbi
because
didn't
it
look at
was-
her on his own. The
Right.
beadle said, this is the one who's
Yeah.
been chosen,
yeah.
who's a volunteered. Why the other women were pretending or acting as if they didn't know there was a contract, they should have known by then there was a contract. They should have known what the rules of the game are.
But here he's breaking the contract. It's be with me for one night.
I don't
And then
think
when they
he's-
wake up, he says, you know what? This was really great. Come home with me.
I don't think it's sincere. I think it's something you say in the moment. I don't know.
But he wakes up, it's not after they've had
Yeah, it
relations.
is.
He had
It is,
slept
it
and
is.
he wakes up, so it's
Yeah, I
it
don't
is.
know.
time
I don't know.
interval.
You can read it, you can read it that way.
We were splayed across the bed. I opened my eyes and he said,
Yeah.
I'll take you with me.
Yeah.
Come home with me, my wife.
Yeah,
So-
he's
This is after.
extending the contract.
Yes.
Yeah.
When so she says.
Do you want to re-up?
Calderon says, when confronted with the question, who will be mine for a day, could a woman really answer, I will? And just between us, why would she do so? Even in the height of the modern feminist revolution, it is still fair to assume that a woman would not enter an intimate relationship with a man without harboring at least some hope that their liaison
Yeah.
would lead to something more.
Mhm.
Is the Talmud hazarding the novel idea that men think this way as well? Must every night of intimacy be an instance of fleeting sanctity? And so she's
Mhm.
basically talking about this. There's one suggestion, the Tosafot, this one commentary that says that it was intended to then bring the woman into the rabbi's home. Something that began with a one-night stand would ultimately lead her to become one of the wives of the head of the great Talmudic Academy.
Mhm. So that's what he was asking her.
But then she says, really? What if his first wife, is she expected to go back to with the rabbi to her hometown? Is she expected to be happy with this new addition of the household? Would she, whatever? She also says, she feels that this marriage for a day is really about giving the rabbi this opportunity to have another life, to live out a fantasy with someone who hasn't seen him every day in his great weakness.
Mhm, mhm.
Maybe the visiting rabbi feels inadequate when he's on his own. As the sages teach, one without a wife is not a man. But can a man not stay alone even for a few days? That's what she said. And then she asked this question of like, that how was this woman chosen? How did the chosen woman imagine the night and anticipate the arrival of the rabbi? Was she looking forward to the festive wedding meal? Maybe the whole transaction was worth the price of that ketubah. Like, why is she in it? What's in it for her? Maybe she longed to become pregnant with the son of the Rav. I mean, like thinking about that's what is the greatness of what Ruth Calderon does here, I think.
Yeah.
What's in it for this woman? Why would she agree to this?
Why did the beetle choose her?
Why would she say yes to the beetle?
Well, they've all been widows, perhaps,
It
Maybe
was
for the
just
money.
lonely.
No, but it could be that he chose somebody who lost their husband and was still
Yeah,
alluring
that she's
and
that she's
in her
She
prime.
was a candidate,
Yeah.
or he wouldn't have gone.
No, but I'm saying it wouldn't be a
Yes.
woman that was actively in a new marriage
Right.
with a young
yes. You have to find the
spouse.
right person.
You
at
have to
right
find
time
the
in
right
life.
match.
Right.
Yeah, who's just a little desperate, right? So I want to read to you from the closing that Ruth Calderon adds in her reflections. I know you don't have it here, so I'm just this is too
Yeah.
much. Like I can't always copy her whole chapter. You should just buy the book. But she says, what if we read this kind of like the 1960s, so sort of like a free love,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
or a short-term marriage? She says one could imagine. Wait, 1 second. Not this part. In our own day, could we consider, just for the sake of the thought experiment, that this type of arrangement in egalitarian form might be a possibility for men and women who find themselves stationed temporarily in unknown cities, so they could spend one day, one weekend, 1 week, married to another, to a temporary spouse? Maybe our sense of the necessary continuity between past and present precludes us from engaging in tens or even hundreds of magical encounters with others who await us in the corners of the world. So she's kind of really getting edgy here, but she's saying, well, maybe a marriage is a marriage, and a marriage could last 50 years or could last 5 days. The sanctity of Christian matrimony, she says, has influenced Western culture. This is what I was saying before. And we are accustomed to viewing the romance of love till death do us part as the final stage of cultural evolution. By the same token, we are accustomed to viewing the culture of the rabbis, whose primary expectation of marriage was the fulfillment of the commandment to procreate, as a betrayal of love. Like we think of this kind of ancient marriage as something that it has no love in it. But the concept of marriage for a day allows us to test how would we behave if we were freed of those accepted and enshrined conventions that govern our lives, the material, the social, the psychological. Perhaps in reality, things could be otherwise. If we consider Rav and Rav Nachman as alternatives to love as we know it, we may find ourselves Western liberals confronting Eastern rabbis, not unlike the members of a stuffy bourgeoisie confronting our more liberated anarchist counterparts. Listen to what she just said. She said, we're the stuffy ones, and they're these liberated, marriage for a day, sleep around folks. And they're doing it completely within the bounds of what's appropriate legally. And
Libertarians.
who are we to say that this isn't okay? I'm not advocating
no.
for this, in reality. We shouldn't all go out on business trips and get married multiple times.
But think of rock stars
But
when
what
they're
I
on
was trying to
tour. It's
say
the
is
same
that
thing.
this was,
They're in a different town.
this
But it's also
never,
married.
this never
No.
threatened people's marriages. It seems to be like
Right.
marriage for a day, marriage
Yeah.
for a week, marriage over here, marriage over there, marriage everywhere. And nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, but it doesn't seem to be presented in a problematized.
Yeah.
sort of
And she
way.
fixes the Aguna problem, boy.
And yeah.
Yeah.
Goodness, like that's,
So, like she's like,
she sure have got
these
that out.
rabbis are pretty, they're like hippies. They believe in free love.
But why getting married? Why not?
Because there's no other legal way for them to sleep around.
When you're talking about the aguna, you mean when she
Collectively.
put the handkerchief back on the bed? Because that to me is symbolic also. If they exchanged the handkerchief and when she left, she put the handkerchief back on the bed.
I don't think it means, it doesn't, so that's not the equivalent of divorce. She isn't divorced.
No, but it's symbolic of,
She's like,
okay,
this wasn't what it was.
our connection is.
Yeah, yeah.
You're
yeah.
no longer
Yeah, it's a great
obligated to
image,
me. It's
though.
it's
Yeah.
perfect. It's a perfect symbolic gesture.
But it's without witnesses.
Hmm.
The
I
transfer.
wonder how the thing would play out if the sex roles were reversed. And it was
Yeah.
the woman who chose a man for one night. It would be interesting to see that.
Okay,
But,
that's the rewrite.
But not in biblical and in ancient times, because the woman did not have the same prerogative as a man. She could not have multiple husbands. He could have multiple wives.
Yeah, yeah.
No, this is the
And-
sci-fi version in the future.
Yes. And even today, the man has to give the woman the get, not the reverse. So
Yeah.
I think the woman is still at a bit of a disadvantage.
But he can't remarry either unless he gets a get too.
Yes, he can. He can
Right,
have
Not
multiple-
now, not now.
practice
After Rabbeinu
anymore.
Oh,
Gershom.
no, not today, obviously. But then.
Matt, what did you want to say?
I feel like her dropping of the handkerchief is kind of like a symbolic answer to his invitation to come home with him.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Said, no,
he
you're free of
offered
your-
that in passion, like it was really great sex and they had lovely conversation, but he didn't really mean it in the reality of the morning. And her answer was like, there's no legal divorcing with the dropping of the handkerchief, but it's like, I'm calling your bluff and like this
That's
way,
what
and we're done. And that's her answer.
Yeah. Do you know that expression, the modern expression, like drop the mic?
Yeah, mic
Kind of
drop.
like the mic drop. Yeah,
Yeah.
like, and I'm out.
Yeah.
Take a bow.
Yeah.
What,
Yeah.
what struck me reading about her interpretation, where she's using all these words that, as you said, we associate with a kosher relationship, right?
Right.
Bride, marriage, chuppah,
Yes.
all those
yeah.
other things. It reminded me, there's a psychologist, Jonathan Haidt, who's written books about conservatives versus liberals and morality. He specializes in the psychology of morality. He said that, according to him, that morality, the moral feeling is attached to the frame, as opposed to being an underlying propensity of people. So that if the frame says kosher, marriage, sanctity, we basically adopt the frame, as opposed to, some of us could go underneath, but most of us accept that our moral feeling is attached to the frame.
Mm.
So once you surround this with the sanctity,
Mhm.
okay, and all the things we talked about, the beetle, the double beetles,
Mm.
she went to the chuppah, to the mikveh rather,
Mhm.
it's everything is kosher.
Yeah.
The only thing that I think about is there's no birth control then.
Right.
Yeah.
And she is not, and so she is
Yeah.
vulnerable to
Yeah.
giving birth to a baby.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But that's not,
Yeah, but
Not
he's
because-
obliged, he's obliged to support her technically because he's married. So she
Yes.
is protected if she does have a baby.
Maybe she calculated, because she said, I banished all thoughts of a baby with a face like Rav.
She
what she
But I was
knows her.
wondering about that, why she said that. Is it because she knows she can't bear children anymore, or she won't be
That's
bearing?
what I'm saying. I think that
This
somewhere
is
she
good.
knew that she was not at risk of becoming.
Or
pregnant.
because she figured that it doesn't happen with one, you know, with
Yeah.
one night, so
Yeah.
I'm banishing
It's
thoughts
not
of,
good, because we don't have a
One good
continued.
swim-
we don't have a
relationship.
continuing.
Yeah, yeah. No, but what are the chances,
Yeah,
you know?
that's,
What are the chances?
But
She
what you're
rolled the
saying
dice.
is-
She's a probabilist. She's a mathematician.
exactly.
What you're saying, though, I think is interesting, that we put the conservative frame around very liberal activities. Once you put the conservative or the structures
Yeah.
in place, anything inside that box is kosher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So interesting.
Hmm.
So I'm conscious of our time. This has been a riot.
Yeah,
It's been
absolutely
good fun.
wonderful.
And she has several rated PG-13 pieces in here. So maybe we'll pace ourselves.
But I was wondering how the title of the.
But I was, yeah, I felt like.
So
it
I'm
was-
glad
it was
that you
time.
chose it.
was
Thank you.
time.
Ah,
Thank
But I
you
wonder
for
why
your
she chose that. title.
comments.
Why?
Yes.
Why she chose.
Because those books will fly off the shelf.
But
Why?
Come on.
Christ for us, no.
It's like a Harlequin romance.
Yeah.
or
Maybe.
Hallmark,
Movie,
Hallmark
a romantic
dramas
movie.
that were
Yes,
before
absolutely.
Christmas and Hanukkah.
So we'll call it a day. We'll call it a Wednesday.
It's
Thank you,
wonderful.
everybody, for joining. It's been
Thank you.
fun. And I look forward to seeing you next week, if not sooner.
And with your sensitivity in teaching.